why don't we go ahead and get started? Hello, everybody. I hope you're in the right place. I am glad to be here. My name is Nate Schlein, and I am a Leland coach and a 2023 Stanford GSB grad. And today I have the pleasure of walking you through how to write SAB, which is become one of my favorite discussion points with my clients on Leland. It's funny that what matters most is what everybody talks about when it comes to getting the application together. And then it seems like I usually do more back and forth coaching sessions with my clients on this essay here instead. So that's why I really have gotten passionate about talking about it. And we'll go through that today. It's a 30-minute session. As I mentioned via email, I'm happy to stay longer if you all have questions that I'm not able to get to here. I love doing this type of work, and I know exactly what it's like to go through the application process. So I want to be here to support you. Great. So today we are going to just walk through, as I mentioned, the real why behind why Stanford. What is it that they're really getting at here? That I call that the question behind the question. And also, we're going to then make sure we take what we then know about the Stanford essay and then transition to writing it in a way that only you can write it. There are right now 40 people on the call, and there should be 40 incredibly different and unique versions of the same essay, right? And so we'll get to that in a moment. And then the last piece we'll talk through is just how to make sure that you're really taking advantage of the many opportunities from a class perspective, club perspective, and so forth, and talking about them in your essay, so you don't spend all your time talking about the obvious classes that we hear so much about, like touchy-feely and Startup Garage. So would love for anybody who has questions to feel free to just throw it in the chat now, and I'll do my best to answer them throughout the session. More people have joined since I just got started, so I'll be sure to stick around afterwards if not everything gets answered. Also, if you so choose, feel free to turn on your camera. Hopefully we can make this engaging. I also know that it's not ideal for everyone. I've been on the other side of these. Great. Okay, so let me just share a little bit about my background here. As I mentioned, I obviously have been now a Leland coach officially on the platform in the past year in 2023, but I've been coaching before that for a few years. And while at Stanford, I was an admissions ambassador working with some of the amazing folks in the admissions committee, helping welcome people onto Stanford campus, doing everything from coffee chats to like one-on-one discussions, and doing like a lot of support when students were actually admitted as well, and helping them feel acclimated to Stanford. I also started as a leader, both years, I was a leader in a program called Dream Big, Lead Boldly, which you can see on the bottom here, was a program that the admissions committee put together to help demystify the MBA experience, for Black undergrads. As I mentioned before, I'm seeing so many folks and my clients that I work with really come to me with more questions about this essay, SAB, and why Stanford than what matters most and why. And so that's something that over time I just got really passionate about helping folks out with. And the last reason that I just really want to be talking to you about this is actually I'm doing right now exactly what I said I would do in my application. And a lot of that came from as a result of me actually following through with what I said I would accomplish at Stanford, doing why Stanford during my why Stanford essay. And so today I'm a startup founder focusing in the social impact space. Happy to talk about more of that offline as well. Great. Okay, so here we are. The question that you see on your paper is why Stanford? It says describe your aspirations and how GSB will help you realize them. I suggest that you take maybe a little bit of a step back and think about it from the perspective of the admissions committee. What I like to say that they are really asking within this question is, why do you need an MBA from Stanford? Why is this an absolute requirement for you to come to Stanford and be on this specific campus as opposed to any other campus? What is it that you need as a sort of stepping stone to get you to the ultimate goal that you have? And once you're able to tell us all that, make sure you help us really just see how you will operate on campus. We want to actually be able to envision you, in this case, down in Town Square, which is like the central place where everybody hangs out at the GSB. And as I mentioned, I really want to make sure that if you take away one thing, it's about writing an essay only you can write. I will tell you at least 2 or 3 times be as specific as possible. The specificity in courses that you choose, the folks that you say you want to meet and collaborate with on campus, that really should tie directly back to what your goals are as a potential Stanford student, and also think a lot about what those gaps are that you have, what you need to get there. And that really brings me to the first tip here, right? And naturally, for you to know where you want to go, you have to understand what gaps you have to get there. I really oftentimes will instruct my clients to look at their feedback. Go back to your performance reviews. Think about what your recommenders plan to say about you and where you've, had room for improvement in the past. It's a required question for them to answer. Then, of course, keep in mind your own instincts. And thinking about all of that, maybe your gap is in you've never really led a team before, or perhaps you don't have a background in accounting, but you really want to start a company someday. Think about how Stanford can help you fill those gaps. Obviously, in that case, you need to take an accounting class, right? But there's probably a lot more that you can do given the immense resources there on campus. One more thing I'll say there is Stanford does not expect you to know exactly what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And it's okay also if you know that there is something that you need, but you're not 100% sure how you can get it. So what I actually like to see every once in a while in one of these is a question. There's no problem in asking a question like, how might I be able to do X, Y, or Z while I'm in this class? And I'll talk more about that as I show you an actual example later. For those, it seems like a lot of more folks have joined. So once again, feel free to just put any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll make sure to answer them. I'll also stick around afterwards in case there's more that we want to talk about. Okay, great. Okay, the second tip here. I told you I'd tell you once again, be specific and vivid, right? Absolutely, you need to paint a picture for these folks to see you on campus. This example here, I think, is just a classic one. And yes, over I see you ask the question, will you share an example of this essay? I will. But this is such I think a good starting point here is I have seen so many times that somebody wants to gain leadership skills. But naturally, I'm going to ask you, what does that really mean, right? What type of leader do you need to be? Once again, what is your gap? In this particular case here, this person had never figured out how to motivate teams with non-monetary incentives. Now you can think that all of a sudden, as a result of getting that a little bit more specific, there is a different class than managing growing enterprises that might be a really good fit for this particular student. Managing growing enterprises is one of the most common and popular classes. In fact, one of my favorites, but it's used a lot, right? And so if you just think a little bit deeper about what it is that you're hoping to get out of it, you might be able to find an even better fit to represent what you need at Stanford. I asked this question of who are the classmates and alumni you need to meet because you get the opportunity to once again paint that picture. I have seen some successful essays that will say something along the lines of, I want to meet a classmate who is a founder from this international market because they will be able to provide me with this insight that I need once again to help me with my goal, which might be something also in that same market, right? Imagine that you have access to a Stanford email address and can get most folks to just respond. Who do you want to contact? Is there somebody who is an alumni that has gone through a similar path to you, show them that you've done the homework and that you really do care about meeting this particular person, because it will help you once again achieve your hyper specific goal that only you will have, as it relates to the rest of your background. And the last piece I'll say about being vivid and why I think it's so important to be so specific here is that the AdCom is building a mosaic, right? They don't admit the 426 students with the best GMAT scores. Instead, they want to create this beautiful mosaic, as I say, of folks with a bunch of different backgrounds, that have different interests, desires, and so forth. And so the more that you're able to showcase yourself on campus doing very specific things like being the leader of a certain club while going and taking a research class across the street at one of the different schools outside of the GSB, the easier it will be for them to see how you fit on campus compared to somebody else. Let's see. Feel free once again to ask questions in the chat here, or feel free also, if anyone has a question about this specifically, speak up. Okay, I'm going to keep on going then. Oh, we have someone who raised their hand. Hello, Ronik. Can you speak?
Hey, Nate. Yeah, thanks. Really interesting. Just a question on maybe comparing sort of where we should express our motivation, or rather how we fit into a mosaic. Is it more in the why Stanford essay or more in the other essay? Because the other essay I feel like is probably a lot about like your internal motivations and your journey. So
Mhm.
what's the balance that you probably need to strike between the two?
That's a great question. The Why Stanford essay can and should likely give a 1-2 sentence summary of what that goal is of yours, but you don't need to belabor the point because you have 255 characters, I think, later on to actually expressly state what you need to do. So you
Right.
might just want to use the language that says the GSB is the best place for me to accomplish X goal, and then finish off that thesis sentence with your A, B, and C reason.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Oh, this one's another one of my favorites. I wonder if any of my clients here are on the call, because you just might see me litter your paper with the same comment, which is Stanford already knows that. This is something I see at least, once every time I get a draft where someone will take valuable word count here, right? You have 350 words to express everything you want to do at Stanford, and they'll say things like this, right? Like, "Hey, the GSB Tech Club is the best, and it will allow me to do these things." Stanford knows that the GSB Tech Club will give you access to inspirational leaders, but what they don't know is what are you going to do as a member or a leader in the GSB Tech Club. Same thing goes not only with like clubs and the classes itself, but a lot of times people want to tell Stanford how great Stanford is as a university, and I think that one is obviously true in a lot of ways, but it's just not something that should take any of this of the actual word count up for you. Okay. I'm just also looking through the chat here. We've got, does the why Stanford have to start with a hook? This why Stanford does not need to start with a hook. Some of the best examples that I've seen actually are similar to what I just mentioned to Ronit, which is, the Stanford GSB will be the best place for me to accomplish my goals, X, Y, and Z because of ABC reasons. And then you go and list out what those reasons are. You might want to add another sentence that says, the space that you're interested in is so important to you because of X, Y, and Z. But be very careful, as I just mentioned, not to tell them something they already know. Like, I wouldn't recommend using extra space to say climate change is one of the biggest problems of our generation that we need to solve. right? Okay, great. Anyone have any questions on that before I continue on? Okay, we're gonna keep on going then. Another one of my absolute favorites here is that I think everybody has, at least I'll speak for myself. I had a lot of um, imposter syndrome, and I was a little nervous to apply to Stanford, given that I started my career in sales. I thought that no one was, ever going to be a salesperson turned MBA, and it just didn't. I didn't see it much in my own network, so I didn't believe it. And in my first drafts of my own Why Stanford, I really tried actually hiding the fact that that was my background. Right, I wanted to sort of show that I, in many ways, had the analytical rigor as a consultant and so forth. But I actually now having gone through the program, seeing the other side, I realized that actually in this case, sales was an incredibly important skill set to have. And I was able to share that with a bunch of my classmates on campus, the learnings that I actually had. And I was able to bring them to a classroom where I was one of the only people with that unique perspective. And that's exactly what Stanford wants to see, right? They want to see folks who can bring something unique to the classroom that otherwise will be missing. And so I really recommend thinking for a moment, if there's something on your resume that's a little different, to actually use that as a position and turn it into a position of strength. And as I talk about that, I think it's also important to think more broadly about your contribution. What is it that you've gained in your role that might seem obvious to you because you've lived in it for the past few years, but wouldn't be obvious for someone from a completely different background? For example, I worked in business development in an enterprise software technology company. And I've learned how to negotiate contracts and work with product and work with engineering. But I had a lot of people in my class who really didn't know much about software whatsoever, that came from financial services or came from a different market where, or a different country where the process was going to be a little bit different to negotiate between two companies and so forth. And that led to a ton of amazing interaction between our classmates, sharing our unique experiences along the way. So really think about and do your best to, in my opinion, to at least add one way in which you plan to contribute and share back, instead of just taking all of the greatness in from the Stanford community. Lastly, here, Stanford obviously cares a ton about entrepreneurship, and it doesn't have to mean that you want to go start a company, but it really is more about ownership, and really just being a self starter overall. So what's going to be different about Stanford after you're gone? And it might not be you're going to start a club, or as I said, start a company, but maybe you'll put on a really cool lunch session where you'll bring a speaker in, and that will become a standard. Or maybe you want to just be a somebody who dances in the GSB talent show. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but like, how are you going to leave your mark and help make sure that they know that? Continuing down that same thread of what Stanford looks for, they're looking for folks who are self-aware and that have humility, right? So be conscious of that, and don't use the 350 words to tell Stanford also that you're an incredibly accomplished, I don't know, musician or Olympian. There's opportunities for them to see that in your resume and in your recommendations. So really think about how you want to just sort of position yourself. Obviously, you have gaps, and that's why you need to come to business school. That's why you're like, it's an absolute requirement for you to get to Stanford, is because not everything is perfect right now, right? Um, I also would then say on that same vein, it's totally cool to say that you met Nate from the class of 23 or whatever you want, whoever you actually take the time to network with. I think showcasing that you are putting in the energy and effort to network is awesome. But I've seen some Y Stanfords that litter the page with a ton of those. And I'd recommend, like, once you do it once or twice, you've sort of maximized the value that will come out of it. And by no means is it required. it's just one way to showcase that you are really interested and engaged. When I say below here, balance practicality and dreaming big, I think it's just important to keep considering what is likely to happen in a 2-year time frame, right? You might want to start a club in a 2-year time frame, but could you be the president of 5 clubs all at once, right? Like there's a lot of different things that are going to take up a ton of time for you on campus. It's a really busy time for you, and you're also at the same time trying to figure out what you want to do next in your career. So don't put too much on your plate to get started, right? I think that's really important. Okay, and then concision's always great and important. You only have 350 words, so I really recommend you work with somebody to just get it edited. Avoid using speaking in a tense that will just add extra words for no reason. Feel free to use apostrophes. Those are all fine, right? Like it doesn't need to be incredibly formal. You just need to get your point across. That's obviously really important in business to begin with. And then, of course, be specific. Okay. I will give you guys a moment here. I will send out this presentation afterwards, but let's all take a moment. I'll let you guys read. I'll let you all read. And in fact, I'm going to go off camera for a good minute so you have a chance to really focus on this. And this is an example that I will share with you afterwards as well. Okay. Does anyone have questions about what they're reading here that I could answer? Alice asked if this was my Stanford essay. Maybe. Yeah. It's much easier for me to broadcast my own work as opposed to a client's work to a lot of people. So this just might be mine. Okay. Someone asked here, what is Gmix? Andrew, thank you for that. I'm going to actually share that in a moment on my final slide for you all.
Excuse me, I have a question, please.
Sure, of course.
So, yeah, my name's Ora. My question is, when I read this, you were talking about we should also be able to talk to mention the things that we would want to do for the GSB so that other people could benefit. But what about when you are an experienced person and you need to explain not why an MBA or why Stanford, but why now? Why didn't you come 5 years ago? Why are you not coming next year? Would this be a place where you could fit that?
That's an interesting question. Yes, I think that's totally fine to do it, and you could do so in maybe a sentence or two. I think that's actually, now that I think about it, I have had that question come up with my clients, especially with the MSX program, which is the executive program. And I think actually, if you apply through the executive program, they do ask why now. I might be mistaken, but I think they do. So yeah, it's a good place to add it in a sentence. But really, once again, you have to answer the question, which is why Stanford. And so I would just focus on answering the question. And then there's always an optional essay where you can add anything else where they like just, where you might have just a question mark on your own resume or on your own application.
Okay, I would like to have another question, please.
Okay. Or would you mind, there's someone else has raised their hand. Do you mind waiting 1 second, or we can stay on afterwards? How about that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sarah, I see you've also raised your hand. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm curious, how did you come up with the content in this? Seems really specific on the class. How did you know kind of how you're going to contribute in this class? Did you talk to any existing current students to come up with this?
I did. I talked to some current students. I worked with a coach who had previously been at Stanford as well. I did a ton of research on my own. And then I really was in the process of actually starting something as I wrote this, like starting a company. And I had all these questions, right? These were my gaps. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to go do all of these things, and I need to figure it out. And I thought Stanford would be a great place to do it. So yeah, I had a lot of support from people who like had been in these classes before. I did a lot of research, but frankly, the main thing was I knew what my gaps were. And so I could be really specific in what I searched for and the questions that I asked.
I see. And is there any connection? Oh, is there any connection between this essay and the previous essay? Like the first essay you'll write about the startup you're going to build, and the second essay is kind of showing the gaps. Is this like intentional to have the connection between the two? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's not required by any means. Like for what matters most, there's usually some sort of thread, a kernel of truth about you that is like has been there since you were young, and that comes from some experience that you had, and it is still with you today, and it will likely be with you tomorrow, right? And maybe that's related to what you want to do in the future, but it doesn't have to be. So I wouldn't say that it's required that those two connect.
I see. Thank you. So this is more to show you've done research in this school. And talk to people. You understand.
Thank you. Okay, and then Akash says, how much is too much to add? Great question. Well, you only have 350 words. You want to make sure that those words are not only like used well, but also that you're really putting together something comprehensive. So, here's an example. I've seen some successful essays that just have like, I don't know, 3 main things that they want to talk to, and they go really deep. Others pick 4 or 5. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you need to make sure that somebody who's reading this in admissions, right, and they read a lot of these, right, that they have a chance to once again see exactly what you're going to do on campus, and then they're going to be like, oh, this is something that Akash wrote because I know all these other things about Akash. So that's what I would say there. Hello, Kamaria. She asks, thoughts on adding personal things to why Stanford, like hobbies, you continue on campus or lean more professionally? It's a good question. Hobbies are great, right? Like that, you might say you are I don't know, like a jazz dancer, and you want to go be part of the dance clubs on campus. There is a way to get involved with what they call the GSB show, an annual like musical where there's opportunities to do dancing, right? So you might choose to do that. I used to do a lot of dinners on campus, cooking dinners with friends, and we pick a topic and speak about it. A small group dinner. It's a really cool thing at Stanford. And so, I think you can do a little bit of both. I would not avoid professional. You need to make sure you have some professional elements to it for sure. Oh, all right, Anouk, we should talk. And okay, I'm going to move on to the final 2 slides really quickly because we're about to be at time. Actually, for anyone who needs to leave exactly at in 20 seconds when we hit the 30 mark, I want you to know that you have the ability to reach out to me, message me with questions. Happy to give you, some more advice as I can, and really I really do love doing this work. So please feel free to reach out. You can, thanks to Amanda from Leland, there's a QR code. We're next level. This is 2024. So you can always get in touch with me. For those who have an extra minute, these are some lesser known things to mention. This is just like my way of saying please do that research and don't focus on touchy-feely and Startup Garage, because you have to keep in mind that there are 6,000 or so applicants. And that is one of the first things that every applicant is going to see when they go to the Stanford homepage, right? Just differentiate yourself by talking about courses that are just a little bit different. So I mentioned here, we've got variations of entrepreneurship labs. I took the class on Entrepreneurship Lab for Human Capital Management, which was super cool. I mentioned Across the Street. Across the Street is the name for the other schools that you can take courses at. Stanford prides itself in that you can take classes at any of those schools, right? So you might have an idea for a really cool company that I don't know, requires you to learn a little bit about philosophy or computer science or what have you. Go find a class that's in that department and talk about that instead. Professors research. Stanford is a research institution. It's also something it prides itself in. So go do some diligence, right? And what are these professors working on? This is like cutting edge research you could be a part of. There was a question of what is GMIX. GMIX is one of several different ways in which you can work internationally at your time at the GSB. Specifically, GMIX is I think it's like a several week program where it's kind of like an internship. I don't ask me what it stands for. It's something about General Management International Experience. I could be completely wrong, but it's an opportunity to go work abroad in an area intentionally that you have no specific background in. They want to give you like a new functional role that you might not have ever done before. And it's a really unique opportunity there. SEED is a similar experience, but that's actually for Stanford more broadly rather than just the GSB. And it usually places you in a developing country with a business. A GST is a 1-week global study trip that you do with your classmates. Okay, community, just 2 random examples. If you like to write, there is what do I call it? A publication called Non-Disclosure. Look it up. As I mentioned, the GSB show is great for anyone who really likes music or acting or theater or dancing. And then here are just some like nice little GSB traditions. Brown bag lunches happen almost every day on campus. At noon, that's when all the programming happens. You're not allowed to schedule people to come onto campus to speak during class time. Luckily, no one has class from 12 to 1. So that's where you'll bring in speakers from all over the place to come and talk. If not, that happens usually at night. Small group dinners, as I mentioned, are an awesome tradition. In many cases, Stanford and Stanford's student government will fund people to go have dinner together. It's awesome. You get to pick like an idea that you have for it. Maybe you want to showcase your cultural cuisine that you grew up making. You can get money so that you can have like 10 people come over to your house and you can, showcase that. I did some really interesting and difficult discussions for a small group dinner during like difficult times in our country and talking about things ranging from politics to race relations. So it's a really great way to get to know your classmates. Okay, 2 other ones really quick. I have one listed. Low Keynotes is they're on YouTube. They're all over the place. It's kind of like a 7-minute TED Talk where you get to share about something that you really deeply care about. I've had friends who have done versions of this for things ranging from why everyone should go work in climate to like why I don't know. I can't think of a second one off the top of my head fast enough. So there's a lot of good ones. Go look it up. And then the other one is Talk. Talk happens once a week, and it is an opportunity for students and classmates to get to know each other deeper. 2 people get to give a 45-minute presentation, a 45-minute speech, more or less, but they call it a talk about their lives. And it's a really good opportunity to become vulnerable and really get to know your classmates better. Okay, so that is, I believe, everything here. As I mentioned, I will gladly share this presentation with you all. Apparently, this will be on YouTube. I didn't know that. And as I said, I'm happy to stick around if anyone has any follow-up questions. Feel free to unmute or to drop off. But either way, thank you so much for your time and best of luck. I know it's a difficult process, but I think everyone should apply to business school because it's an awesome opportunity to be introspective and figure out what's next.
Thank you.
May I have a question, please, since you're still
Of course.
staying? So, I've been researching Stanford for a while. You have the MSX program and you have the MBA program, and whenever I approach people or outcomes, they tell me because of my experience that I'll be more suited for the MSX. But I've decided to apply for both. How do I write my reason for the MBA or the MSX, because I'm applying to them at the same time, without sounding like I don't know what I want?
Okay. I don't think that you should be too concerned about that because the programs are the same. One is just a year shorter, right? And the MSX program is a year shorter, but it's the same curriculum. So we're all in the same classes together. It's just an expedited process. And then naturally, like it's a smaller class size that are people who are in later stage in their career. So by no means would it seem like you don't know what you want. I think, most folks will apply for both because why not? But I think in the end, it is a question just about where you are in your career and if you feel comfortable taking that time off of, from the workforce.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Nate. Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I had a question about, in tip number 5, you said be self-aware and show humility.
Yes.
And I want, because you said you came from sales and then you moved into social entrepreneurship. How do you balance going between, especially if you're like transitioning industries or something that you don't really have any background in?
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance like that showing that self-awareness in your essay and humility, but also kind of wanting to show like your ambition and passion for something that's completely different from your background?
Oh, interesting. And was that Dante who spoke? I can't.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, I just see some flashing lights at the bottom. Okay, Dante, that's a good question. As I think about this, a few things. One is that keep in mind why Stanford is not your only opportunity to share about your passion and ambition.
Yeah.
And so I really think about the application as a puzzle, right? There's just a bunch of pieces. You've got 3 impact essays. You've got an opportunity to explain your background and how it ties to something you've done recently. You've got what matters most and why, and then this. And so maybe to some extent, you don't try to fit that all into one. So that's one thought that comes to mind. I think that the best way to show or to sort of demonstrate your ambition is to just prove that you've done the hard work to, know what questions you need answered. You don't have to know the answer once again, right? Like I think in this essay, there's a lot of questions. How do you preserve quality of service and navigate varying labor and employment laws? I didn't know. I hadn't done it before. And so this is why I think it's, maybe a nice way to show a little bit of vulnerability and openness and transparency. Like vulnerability is a huge thing within the Stanford community. And I really recommend you reflect that in one way or another. Yeah, it's okay to not know exactly what you're doing or to like be clearly on the path to figuring it out.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nate. That answers.
Hi, Nate. My name is Alice. I have a really quick question. Do you mind just scrolling to the last slide before your essay?
Oh, before my essay. Yeah, this one?
No, the one you had prior.
This one?
Yes, perfect. And thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful, especially showing us your essay. And thank you so much for all your vulnerability and courage and sharing everything with us today. Yeah, thank you. And just a few quick questions here. Do you mind explaining what are brown bag lunches and the acronyms you have here about GMIX, SEED, and GSTs?
Yeah. So brown bag lunches, as I mentioned, it's from 12 to 1 almost every day during the week. it's just a term for like a lunch speaker coming in to talk, right? Like at this point, it's rare that people actually bring brown bag lunches, but that's the concept behind it. Sometimes food will be served. Other times it's just come with your lunch and learn from somebody. And then GMIX, I, I don't remember what it stands for, but something with international experience is what it stands for. But what you do is you go do an internship abroad, and intentionally it's in a space that you don't have professional and functional experience in. I have classmates who like went into a matcha farm in Japan. Pretty cool. Seed is similar, but for developing countries, and it is a broader. It's for broadly Stanford overall, not just the GSB. Thank you there, Jean-Baptiste. And then the last one, GST, is a global study trip. That is just a 1-week excursion led by classmates. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And do you mind describing to us a little bit about the other parts of your candidate profile? For example, your essay was super helpful. Can you talk a little bit about the extracurriculars you did as well, and also scores? This would be especially helpful for someone who's also like a non-traditional candidate and maybe has a little lower GPA. So would love your experience.
Sure. Well, this is being put on YouTube, so I don't know how much I want to share about everything broadly, but like what I'll share with you is that, yeah, I non-traditional applicant in the sense of my background not having like consulting or investment banking on it. I worked in technology. I went to a non-Ivy undergrad, did well in school. Yeah, started a few things along the way. I had some entrepreneurial experiences. Did not have some. I did not get an 800 on the GMAT, so I was a pretty. I don't want to say standard applicant because that seems tough to say, but I'm no Olympian or anything like that. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, but maybe we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Of course. I see some questions here. Yes, you'll get the recording. Yes, I do work with deferred applicants. And then some other folks have raised their hand. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Of course.
My name's Lindsay. I have a question. So Stanford is my top choice, but I'm honestly like not that interested in starting a company. I'm more interested in operating companies that already exist. Is that something I should lean into? Like,
yes.
Or do you not like, do I need to mention entrepreneurship in another way?
No, you need to be like so true to yourself here because, and I'm kind of guessing here, but when you see 6,000 applicants every year and you read through all the essays, someone in admissions committee, I assume it's, increasingly easy to see who's just saying what they think Stanford wants to hear versus what they want themselves. Stanford is a great place to start a company, but by no means do you need to start a company. Most of my classmates didn't. And some who said they were going to decided not to. And then some folks who actually graduated and started companies have since gone to do more operating or investing. It's completely, up to you what you want to do. And Stanford has a ton of resources for folks who want to go like acquire an existing company and operate it, or just like go work in, a management role somewhere else.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of course. DK, I'm sorry, I can't see your name, so feel
Hey,
hey, David.
Quick question is, what advice do you have just finding that right balance of, well, let me take a step back. As you know, career and your future plan is a jungle, is not a ladder. So how do you find a fine line of not going super detail around like, here's what I will do and this is what I hope to achieve, but also like tying more to like, hey, like I want to leverage Stanford resources to explore X area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if my question is making sense. It's just like I think I'm having a difficult time maybe being too specific versus like how can Stanford help me in that broader like topic or something that I do want to achieve.
Yeah. I think you're bringing up a great point. And of course, like this is just one style of writing an essay. That's just what I've seen success in. And I probably should have started the whole presentation saying that. But, I think that it's totally okay, once again, to not know exactly what you want to do. And you don't need to be as hyper specific as this one essay was, right? It's one example. But you should be able to tell Stanford what you're going to do when you get to campus, right? That's what's important. And I would prioritize just showcasing that you've done research, right? And so even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, let's say you want to go into investing, you still probably will apply to be part of the Stanford investment, like impact investment club, for example. Or, you might not know you want to take this course from this professor and ask this question, but you're still going to have a good amount of specificity in the direction you want to go. And by the way, I followed through with a lot of the stuff I wrote in my essay, but most people don't, and that's totally cool. So don't like hold yourself to it too much, but like give yourself a starting point, because also when you arrive on campus, like the clock starts ticking, and your 2 years begin, and it's a whirlwind, and you don't want to waste time not knowing which direction to start.
May I ask a question again? Because I don't see anybody's hands up.
Sure.
So you mentioned that it's okay to put a question somewhere in your essay. But my mind, I'm thinking it's counterintuitive, because all I've heard so far is you should be able to express to the school why, without more or less not having a doubt why you want to do it. So I don't know how I could put a question in my why Stanford for it not to take away from the why I want to come there.
No, I understand. When I'm suggesting you can, and you don't have to throw a question in there, it would be to say like, what's something that you need to uncover while you're at school, right? Maybe like, you want to be in finance, but the question is like, do I want to be in investment banking or private equity? It doesn't hurt for you to say something along those lines, but like, it doesn't take away from your certainty that you need Stanford to help you figure it out, right? So the questions that you're asking is not like, do I want to come to business school? It's like, here's some like a question I've been thinking about, and you know where I could find that out? Stanford's campus.
Yeah, I get it. So for me, I get what would it be, because I want to do strategy, but then you have corporate strategy and you also have internal strategy.
Sure. And what's not only like what's the difference, but like how have folks transitioned from one to the other? Or there's like a lot of different questions you might care to ask that you would probably figure out as soon as you get onto campus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Hi.
Sorry.
Hi. Can I make a quick question? I hear everything you said about the essays, but regarding the other questions in the applications, for example, I was reviewing to some that appear in personal information, like additional context, like we want to know that each person is, he says, we know that each person is more than a list of facts and predefined categories, and please tell us a little bit about your background and how that is like influenced your decisions or what you want to do, right? I started like writing my response to that questions, and as you, I have like a background that is very like different because I have been in different industries, but I'm now very secure on what I want to do in the future. And somehow I have been implementing that in the decisions that I have made in the past years. Mm-hmm. But for me, it has been difficult to respond to questions regarding of how I put those examples to be more specific on how that's influenced like my future decisions, because the past decisions have been, have been in HR and product supply and things like that. But I want to be more into tech. Like how important is like to use those other questions that are besides the essay to also like showcase that you will say.
Well, okay. Once again, I'm only one example here. I recommend, if you can, write the optional essays. Once again, if you have an answer, don't make anything up. Don't try too hard. But on that last point, I wouldn't recommend trying to like fit like the classic expression is like, don't fit a square peg in a round hole, right? Like, don't try to force something to work. And instead, I'd recommend like answering that question truthfully, which is the question if I'm remembering correctly of what you're talking about. It's the one that's tied to background and how it's impacted your some recent decisions you made.
Yeah.
That question used to be phrased slightly differently, and it more specifically said like, what about your upbringing, your culture, your religion, your ethnicity, and so on and so forth has impacted the work that you're doing, right? So think of it I would just answer that question directly rather than trying to tie it to professional work, right? It's really important throughout the entire application to show a 360-degree version of yourself, right? There might be a lot of people who apply with a background in HR, but not everybody has a background in HR who's come from a certain place that has this hobby and likes to do this on the side and blah, 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 right? So that'd be my recommendation for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay, there are more folks who raised their hand. Let's see, Lord.
Hi, Nate.
Hello.
So I would like to find out about including opportunities to network and leverage on emerging technologies to achieve my career objective in my statement. Do you think something like that is applicable and allowed?
Maybe could you repeat that question? I want to make sure I understood correctly.
Okay. So my genuine objective is to be in a position of decision making at the world stage to ensure that positive impact is made in the lives of marginalized people.
Okay.
And what I want to find out is, when I'm writing my statement, can I include that coming to Stanford will give me an opportunity to build solid networks and then take advantage of emerging technologies?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, it's a big piece of Stanford is the community, the network. You might want to get more specific, right? Rather than saying you want to have a network, who do you need to know? Who will really enable you to do it? Do you need an investor, right? Or do you need somebody who's a co-founder or a friend? Like what is it that you need? And I think that would be my recommendation for you in addition.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Corinna, I see you're next.
Hi, this is Karina, and I'm hoping to apply around one this year. So thanks so much for this timely session. I have a question around career goals and specifically around the entrepreneurship. Sorry if I missed this earlier. How specific do I have to be if the entrepreneurship goal is for the longer term? Like, do I just say things like I'm interested in entrepreneurship through acquisition, or do I need to mention the idea for the venture, or just kind of like the impact that I'm trying to make eventually?
Yeah, and that's your long-term goal, not your short-term goal, right?
Correct.
It's not. How do I want to say this? No need to like make something up or go beyond what you've got. I would just share what you know, right? So if you want to do entrepreneurship through acquisition, mention it. If you know you want to do entrepreneurship through acquisition for a specific type of company, that's also great. But I don't think you need to force anything beyond what you already know. But I would say you want to say something more specific than I want to be an entrepreneur in the future, right? You got to tell me something about it. Is there an industry that you're really interested in? Is there a problem statement you want to go deeper in? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, can I ask another question, please?
Sure.
So you mentioned about the importance of showing the 360 side of yourself. So this is with regards to like the activities they ask you that you're involved in. So do you recommend we try to include only like certain highlights that kind of tell one tight narrative with our essays? Or do you think we should include like all of our accomplishments and involvement so far, like even if they are more varied? Like, for example, if I'm involved in various types of volunteering, across like different themes like women's advocacy, international development, so on and so forth, but it's not as, I guess, tight with my professional ambitions.
Yeah, I would recommend showing your whole self. Yeah, I mean, that's part of you, that's part of your story. And once again, there might be somebody else who has your same background, but does that same person have the same background with your passion projects as well? And that might be what differentiates you, you know? So I would recommend adding it.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. All right. We are going on a little bit longer, but I'm happy to stay for 5 more minutes if there are more questions.
I have a question, please, if I may.
Sure.
So, as a reapplicant to GSB, I'm struggling to see how I can show them what has changed in the past 6 months, even though I have done quite a bit in the past 6 months to differentiate myself, like rewriting the GRE, doing MBA math. I got invited as a judge for the Energy Awards 2024. Organizing more events, won a tender at work, things like that. Now, I've done all these things, and I don't see how or where in the application I could kind of show them that I have grown from where I was.
Yeah, I know what you're saying there. That's where you would put it in the if it isn't defined as a reapplicant essay, right? There's like I think there's a space that says tell us what's new. If not, I would use the optional essay space for that to say I'm reapplying because of these new learnings that I have, the growth that I've gotten. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Of course. Okay, Hannah with another one here. Are there any other questions you recommend we think about as we aim to articulate what's unique about us? Okay. Are there any other questions you recommend we think about as we aim to articulate what's unique about us? Okay. Hannah, feel free to come off mute if you have more to say here, but this is actually, your question is the exact reason why I love to coach. Everybody's story is unique. And frankly, most folks just don't realize it because they live it every day. I would argue that even somebody who has what they call a traditional background still has something unique about them. And that might be their motivations of what they want to do in the future. It might be a volunteer project they've done in the past. It might be a language that they speak, a culture, a community that they're connected to. And so I would just really take a moment and just, what if everything you did was unique? Then where would you be? And how would you showcase that? So it's hard to know much more without your specific background, but I would argue that there is likely something unique about you that you could probably find a way to showcase, and happy to help you with that. And that's, I guess, maybe where we will end it. So once again, you all can click the QR code if you would like to have a follow-up conversation with me. I think you can also just search for me on Leland, and Amanda has been throwing my link to my profile here. So looking forward to all of your success. Please keep me updated. If you write a great essay from this conversation today and something good happens, I want to hear from you. So rooting for you all, and best of luck.